What you're about to hear has never been revealed to Western media. A man who spent 38 years at the heart of North Korea's most secretive foreign operations, the Official, who personally managed missile technology transfers to Iran, sat down and told us everything. The covert accounts, the shell companies, the 3 trillion won that vanished in a single night, and the phone call placed in the dark during an airstrike that changed the course of a nuclear program. For more exclusive testimonies, subscribe and become part of our investigative community. It was June 2025, the month Israeli airstrikes hit Iran's nuclear facilities. The man Kim Jong-un trusted enough to send personally to Tehran, one of the most powerful figures in the Korean Workers' Party, didn't flee to South Korea. He went to the United States. With CIA assistance, he eventually made his way to South Korea. For nearly 4 decades, he had served as director of the United Front, department a man trusted since the Kim Jong-il era. Then in a single night, he vanished. And he didn't leave empty-handed. He took 3 trillion Korean won payment owed to Iran for missiles and oil, money that was supposed to keep a nuclear program running. What you're about to hear will surprise you. His plan didn't just change his own fate. It changed the fate of everyone he left behind. Why did he turn his back on Kim Jong-un? What happened to his family still in Pyongyang? And why did he go to America first before South Korea? He explained all of it. I'm sharing that story here for the first time. Before we begin, if this kind of story moves you, a like and subscribe, help more people find it. And drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from. I can't tell you my name here in South Korea. Even now, armed guards rotate outside my home around the clock, people assigned by the South Korean government. At first that felt strange. But now if I don't hear their footsteps, I can't sleep. That's how clearly I understand that somewhere out there, someone still wants me dead. I entered the party at 18 and walked a single path for 38 years. I earned Kim Jong-il's trust. When Kim Jong-un took over, I remained at the core of the United Front department. People around me said I was unshakable. I believed it myself. Then in June 2025, I walked away from all 38 years. In a single night. That night in Tehran is still right there when I close my eyes. It was just after Israeli fighter jets struck Iran's nuclear facilities. The entire city turned upside down. I sat alone in my office, staring at a laptop screen. I had first set foot in Tehran in the spring of 2025. The morning I left Pyongyang, my wife set the table without a word. My son sat quietly and ate. The 3 of us moved our spoons in silence. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. My wife knew. My son knew. This wasn't a routine assignment. Our family had already stepped inside the plan, communicating everything through glances, through the silence over that breakfast table. The seeds of that plan had been planted long before Tehran. December 2013, I watched it happen in Pyongyang the day Jang Song-taek was publicly arrested. You may have heard about it. Dragged out of a meeting, executed within days. But there's a difference between watching it on the news and standing close enough to feel it. Jang Song-taek was my superior. He was the one who helped me find my footing in the United Front department, who earned me Kim Jong-il's trust. I walked in the direction he pointed. I believed what he said was right. He was called the second most powerful man in North Korea. He had held the center of the regime for over 30 years. Then he was gone. The charges were dressed up in various language, but I knew the truth. It wasn't about crimes. He had lasted too long, knew too much, grown too large. That was his crime. And that day I understood something for the first time. In this system, the longer your loyalty, the more you know, the more dangerous you become. So where did that leave me? Someone who had run the United Front department since the Kim Jong-il era. Someone who had worked closely with Jang Song-taek. Someone who had seen too far inside. My neck could have been on the line at any moment. From that day forward, I kept my face unchanged. I attended meetings, filed reports, recited loyalty oaths. But inside, quietly, very quietly, I began looking for a way out. Not yet. Don't rush. The opportunity will come. Be ready to take it when it does. That was all I could do. Years passed. Then in 2025, the order came Tehran. My official title was Vice Chairman of the Korean Workers' Party. Before the Tehran assignment, I had been serving as Director of the United Front Department. If you understand what that position means, someone who had held it since the Kim Jong-il era, you understand how significant it was that a person like me was sent to Tehran in person. My business card said I was head of the Korea Trade Corporation's Tehran office. The actual mission was something else entirely. North Korea was providing Iran with missile-related technology and hardware. Iran was supplying oil in return. My job was to manage the full flow of that, money on both sides without tripping international sanctions. As you may know, both North Korea and Iran are under U.S. sanctions. Official financial transfers are impossible. No banks. No direct dollar exchanges. That's why someone like me was needed. Build dozens of shell companies. Split the money across multiple countries. Layer it through circuits. No one can trace. Pool it somewhere untouchable. Money laundering, in plain terms. I was an expert at it. For the first 2 or 3 years, I worked like a machine. Check the numbers, transfer, report, execute instructions from Pyongyang, file the report. I was looking for a way out, but I wasn't rushing. The opportunity had to come from the other side. Then 2017 arrived. The scale of transactions jumped sharply. North Korea's missile technology exports grew. Iran's oil deliveries expanded. The figures in my ledgers multiplied. And then something strange happened. My predecessor was suddenly recalled to Pyongyang. No warning, no explanation. His name was Chu Dong-hyuk, 10 years older than me, a veteran who had worked this operation for over a decade. The day he left, he pulled me close and said very quietly, "Comrade Park, a ledger should stay a ledger. Don't look behind the numbers." 3 months later, word came back. Choi Dong-hyuk had been sent to a political prison camp. 30 years of loyalty, and he simply disappeared. The same way Jang Song-thaek had disappeared. That night, I looked behind the numbers. I traced dozens of shell accounts, one by one until they all converged at a single point. Bureau 39, Kim Jong-un's private treasury. While North Korean people starved and froze, every one from missile sales, every dollar from oil payments, every last bit of it flowed straight to the top. I closed the file and stared out the window for a long time. A few stars were visible in the Tehran night sky. The opportunity I had been waiting for, it was right here. It was the fall of 2024. The cable from Pyongyang arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was at my desk going through the ledgers. The Tehran air was cool, and through the window people were hurrying to work. Nothing felt unusual. The message was short. Vice Chairman Park is to return to Pyongyang within the month for an accounting review. 2 sentences, stamped by the organization and guidance department. I read it twice, then set it down slowly. An accounting review, reasonable enough on the surface, but I had been in this world for over 30 years. I knew how many people summoned for an accounting review ever came back. Cho Dong-hyuk had received a cable just like this. He went to Pyongyang. He never returned to Tehran. Jang Song-thaek had a full meeting schedule the morning he was taken. In this system, a summons means one of 2 things: a promotion or the end. For someone like me who knew too much and had been around too long, there was no need to think twice about which one this was. That afternoon, I locked my office door and laid out the plan. In concrete terms, for the first time, everything I had only sketched in my mind, I began translating into real steps. When, which route, who to contact first. South Korea's National Intelligence Service was never an option. That might surprise you. Same people, same language. A country that accepts defectors. But think about what I was carrying. Original contracts for North Korea's missile technology transfers to Iran. The complete list of money laundering accounts. Decades of transaction records. This wasn't ordinary defector intelligence. This was the heart of a nuclear proliferation network the U.S. had been tracking for decades. I knew exactly what would happen if I walked into Seoul first. North Korean operatives are in Seoul. No one knows how far their reach extends inside the NIS. The moment I chose South Korea, that information could reach Kim Jong-un's ears before I ever boarded a plane. If that happened, my family in Pyongyang would be gone. And so would I. It had to be America. More precisely, the Trump administration. Iran's nuclear program isn't just a foreign policy issue for Washington. President Trump had been pushing Iran nuclear negotiations as his top priority since taking office. The documents I was carrying North Korea's dealings with Iran were exactly the leverage the U.S. needed to pressure Tehran. I had what they wanted most. And in any negotiation, the side holding the strongest cards sets the terms. That's true in Pyongyang, in Tehran, in Washington. It's the same everywhere. I began carefully exploring how to approach the U.S. embassy side. Walking up to the front door wasn't an option. The moment anyone knew I had moved, everything would collapse. North Korean Ministry of State security agents were in the same building as me. They reported my every move. Every meal, every walk, every conversation, I was always being watched. During the day, I acted exactly as I always had. Reviewed the ledgers, met with Iranian counterparts, returned to my quarters in the evening. But at night, my mind never stopped. The Pyongyang deadline was closing in. Time was running out. Around that time, a call came from my wife in Pyongyang. Brief. She spoke carefully. The kimchi making season has come. That was our code. Something had shifted on her. And the surveillance around our family had tightened. I hung up and looked out the window. The autumn sky over Tehran was high and blue. To anyone else, a peaceful scene. For me, the clock was nearly out. June 22nd, 2025. Around 7 that evening, air raid sirens began sounding across Tehran. Word spread in minutes the Israeli Air Force had launched strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. At first, I thought it was a rumor. The Middle East ran on rumors. But this was different. The anchor on the news screen had gone rigid. Iranian state broadcasting cut out suddenly. The building manager ran down the hallway, shouting for everyone to get to the basement. I didn't go down. I was alone in the office. The security agents, the Iranian counterparts, everyone had fled outside or down to the shelters. For the first time, the watching eyes were gone. I had known this moment would come. More precisely, I had been waiting for it. For years, I had been tracking Iran's air defense network. A significant portion of the funds I managed was tied to maintaining that system. I knew better than anyone what North Korea's missile technology was being used for, and I knew that when that air defense developed a gap, Iran's communications infrastructure would shake with it. Israel had just hit that gap. I opened the laptop. The few seconds it took the screen to light up felt longer than they should have. Outside, something in the distance sounded like an explosion. The office windows trembled faintly. I kept my hands moving. On the screen, the transfer list I had been preparing for months. The full payment owed to Iran missile fees, oil payments totaling 3 trillion won sitting in queue waiting to cross to Iran's designated accounts. Under normal circumstances, that money was supposed to move that very night. Transaction complete, mission over. Then I was to be recalled to Pyongyang. I changed the destination. Instead of Iranian accounts, dozens of paper company account numbers filled the fields. Accounts I had been building over months scattered across Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Concentrating everything in one account invites tracking. It had to be split as finely as possible. $500,000, 1 million, 2 million. Numbers scrolled across the screen. I will never forget the moment I pressed that first transfer button. My fingertips were cold. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. But my mind was clear. I learned something that night. Fear, past a certain threshold, goes quiet, like the eye of a storm. Transfer complete. Transfer complete. Transfer complete. Confirmation messages lined up across the screen. I held my breath and stared. If Iran's system detected an anomaly, an alert would fire. If the line to Pyongyang was still live, a call would come any second. 2 minutes passed. Silence. Israel's strikes had severed a significant portion of Iran's communications. My calculation had been right. Pyongyang and Tehran had lost sight of each other. I kept going. It took over an hour. Outside, explosions came at intervals. City lights flickered on and off, district by district. I sat in the dark in the light, eyes on the screen, fingers moving. 3 trillion won, broken into dozens of fragments, scattering across the world. I didn't leave my chair once. When the last transfer cleared, the clock read 11 p.m. I closed the laptop. For the first time, I leaned back, stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light was white and cold. 38 years. Over. Now there was only one thing left: get out of here alive. And to do that, I had one phone call to make. The number had been decided for months. I reached into my pocket for a secondary phone I never used. Dialed. 2 rings. Someone picked up. Silence. I didn't speak first. In any negotiation, the one who speaks first is the weaker side. Tehran, Pyongyang, any table, same rule. I had spent 38 years learning that. 4 seconds of silence, then the other side spoke. English. Low. Calm. We've been waiting. I gave the code number. I had prepared a sequence that confirmed my identity. Then one more sentence, compressing everything I was carrying into a single line. A pause on the other end. Tomorrow. Tanam. I'll send the location by text. The call lasted under 30 seconds. The address that came the next morning was a small hotel on the northern edge of Tehran. I left the office as if heading to work. The security agent might follow. I changed direction 3 times, switched taxis twice, cut through a market alley, moved through a crowded underpass. No one was behind me. The city was still reeling from the strikes. The state security agents weren't immune to that chaos. 3rd floor, last room. 3 knocks. 2 men opened the door. A white man in his 50s and someone who appeared to be Korean, both in suits. No business cards. On the table, 2 laptops and a recorder. Curtains drawn. The hum of an air conditioner. I sat down. "Did you bring it?" the white man asked. Instead of answering, I reached into my bag and placed an envelope on the table. He opened it. Inside, 1 USB drive and several printed documents. He plugged in the drive. As he studied the screen, something in his expression tightened, barely visible, but there. The Korean-looking man leaned forward. I watched their reaction and thought, this works. The Americans wanted 3 things: the original North Korea-Iran missile technology transfer contracts, the complete list of money laundering accounts from the past decade, the roster of North Korean technicians stationed at Iranian nuclear facilities. I had brought all 3. From the day I first arrived in Tehran, I had been collecting these piece by piece, preparing for a day that might never come. After Jongsung-thak was taken, I hadn't let a single day go by without adding to that preparation. My conditions were also 3. First, guaranteed asylum for myself, my wife and my son with lifetime protection. Second, diplomatic efforts to limit North Korean retaliation against relatives left in Pyongyang. Third, $1 trillion, one to the United States, $1 trillion to South Korea in exchange for legal immunity covering the remainder. The white man looked up from the screen and met my eyes. Regarding the third condition, what do you intend to do with the remaining amount? I gave the answer I had prepared. That's my concern. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. President Trump is personally overseeing this. We'll have an answer within 72 hours. The meeting ran over 2 hours. Documents reviewed, account numbers verified one by one, transaction dates and amounts cross-checked. Questions came. I answered everything I knew, exactly as I knew it. Withhold something and its value disappears. At this table, the worth of what I held depended entirely on how accurate and complete my information was. Walking out of the hotel, I looked up once at the sky. Tehran's morning sun was already hot. I caught another taxi and returned to the office as if nothing had happened. Sat at my desk, opened the ledgers. The security agent was at the end of the corridor. I gave him a small nod. He nodded back. An unremarkable afternoon. The 72 hours had begun. Those 72 hours were the longest 3 days of my life. Days nothing had changed. Desk, ledgers, meetings with Iranian counterparts, lunch at the usual restaurant. I walked slower than normal, smiled a little more than I needed to. A man running can't afford to look like he's running. The moment something seems off, someone notices. That's how this world works. Then, on the first afternoon, something unexpected happened. One of the security agents, a man named Kang Chol-soo, early 30s, sharp eyes, very few words, walked into my office without warning and sat across from me. "Vice Chairman, Pyongyang has been in touch. They want a specific return date." I looked at him, kept my face still. "The month-end accounting isn't closed yet. Tell them I can't move until it's done." Kang studied me. Something was calculating behind his eyes. Young but not simple. Still, all he could do was report. I knew that. After he left, I sat motionless for 5 minutes. Time was compressing. If Pyongyang was pressing for a specific date, the recall deadline was very close. The Americans had said 72 hours, but everything had to move within that window. If it didn't, I might find myself boarding a plane to Pyongyang. Before the answer came, that night I barely slept. I lay watching the lights of Tehran through the window, thinking about Pyongyang. What is my wife doing right now? Where is my son? Are they moving according to the plan? I couldn't call. Phoning my wife at that moment was itself a signal to state security. I had to trust. Trust my wife. Trust my son. Trust the plan we had built together. Second morning, Kang was back. Pyongyang has followed up. They want return preparations completed by the end of this week. Different tone this time. Not a request. A notification. I kept my eyes on the papers. Understood. I'll prepare. After he left, I counted silently. 48 of the 72 hours had passed. 24 left. That afternoon, I had a final meeting with the Iranian counterpart. He complained about delays since the strikes. I smoothed things over and ended the meeting. He didn't know it was the last time we'd sit across from each other. I did. Just past midnight, the second night, the backup phone vibrated. One text message. All conditions accepted. Vehicle comes at 2 a.m. tomorrow. Minimum luggage. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. The phone went into the toilet. No traces. That's the baseline. I packed. Or rather, I didn't pack. A passport, a document file, a small amount of cash. That was everything. I left the clothes, the personal items, everything in the room, exactly as it was. A bag would draw attention. 38 years of a life. And what I needed to carry it fit in one inside pocket. 1 a.m. I left the quarters. Walked slowly as if taking a late stroll. 2 turns through back alleys to check behind me. No Kang. No other agents. State security rarely stations someone outside at 1:30 in the morning. I had built that into the timing. The pickup point was a small gas station on the northern edge of the city. 20 minutes on foot. I walked it in a strange calm. Not fear. Not excitement. Just walking. The feeling of a long road nearing its end. A black sedan was parked at the gas station. Headlights flashed twice the signal I knew. I got in. The car moved. The 2 men in the front seat said nothing the entire way. I didn't ask anything. The car headed northwest out of Tehran. The roads at that hour were empty. The Iranian countryside flowed past in the dark. Distant lights appeared and disappeared. I closed my eyes for the first time. Around 4 a.m., the car stopped at a small airfield. A light aircraft was already idling on the runway. I turned back once before climbing the stairs. The Tehran sky before dawn was still dark. Something smoke or the first hint of light hung faint on the eastern horizon. I looked at it for a moment. That was the last thing I saw of Tehran. The plane lifted off. I didn't know where it was headed. I didn't need to know. 2 layovers. 2 days of flying. Then a short message came through. My wife and son had gotten out safely through a separate route. The Americans had kept their promise. When I read those words, I closed my eyes for the first time since it all began. Something hot rose from behind them. I pressed it back down. It wasn't over yet. Washington was waiting. I arrived in Washington at the end of June 2025. The airport was different from the moment we landed. No standard immigration, a separate corridor. Document check under 3 minutes. 2 black vehicles were waiting and took me directly somewhere. Windows completely opaque. Lead and follow cars. I couldn't tell how long we drove. We arrived at a facility on the outskirts of Washington. No sign on the building. Gray exterior, small windows, armed security at the entrance. I was assigned a room. Clean and quiet. A bed, a desk, 1 window. Trees outside. I looked at those trees for a long time. That night I saw my wife and son for the first time. They were brought in from another room. When I saw them walk through the door, I couldn't speak for a moment. My wife had lost weight. My son had grown a beard. The 3 of us stood looking at each other without a word. She turned her head first. Her eyes were red. I couldn't speak either. I just took her hand. Less than 30 seconds. Then the escort came in and explained the next day's schedule. We went back to our separate rooms. That was enough for now. There were still things that had to come first. Debriefings began the next morning. 3 to 4 hours a day for 4 days. Different faces came each. Sessions, some in military uniform, some in suits with analyst's eyes. A Korean interpreter was always present. They asked the same questions in different ways, many times over. The details of the North Korea-Iran transactions, the money laundering channels, the level of technical transfer, the identities of North Korean technicians at Iranian nuclear sites. I told them everything I knew, exactly as I knew it. The same answer the second and third time as the first. A lie always catches itself somewhere. I had spent 38 years learning that too. On the morning of the 4th day, the interviewer walked in and said simply, "This afternoon you have a meeting with the president. Please prepare." I couldn't respond for a moment. I had heard in Tehran that Trump was personally overseeing this, but I had only half believed an actual meeting would happen. A sitting American president, meeting a North Korean defector in person, unprecedented. That fact alone said everything about the weight of this matter to Washington. In the car on the way to the meeting, I thought to myself, if Jong Song-thaek were alive, how would he see this moment? The day he was dragged out of that conference room, something inside me locked into place. A decision that had been forming for years. 12 years later, I was at the end of it. The meeting room was smaller than I expected. 1 conference table, a few chairs, no American flag display. President Trump was already seated. 2 aides, 1 interpreter. I sat across from him. He was more direct than I had expected. The diplomatic pleasantries ended fast. He went straight to it. What is the current level of technology? North Korea is providing to Iran, I answered as prepared. North Korea was supplying missile guidance system components that Iran couldn't manufacture independently. Without that technology, Iran's precision strike capability would drop significantly. The fact that Iran's air defense had been penetrated in the recent strikes was not unrelated to delays in North Korean technical support. Trump nodded. Will those transfers continue? My leaving won't stop them. A replacement has almost certainly already been deployed. He looked at me for a moment. Then, what's the mood inside Pyongyang right now? How do you think Kim Jong-un is taking all of this? I answered honestly. Kim Jong-un is managing two things simultaneously, containing the fallout from my defection, internally and filling the gap in the Iran arrangement. Neither is straightforward. On the Iranian side, especially 3 trillion won, has vanished, and Tehran will press Pyongyang hard on that. How that diplomatic friction plays out, I can't predict. The meeting lasted under 30 minutes. As it ended, the president stood and said, "You made a courageous decision. America keeps its promises." We shook hands, short and firm. That moment was what later leaked to the press. I don't know exactly how it got out, but I suspect the American side let it out, intentionally signaling to both North Korea and Iran at once. Sometimes a photograph sends a stronger message than any words. The day that photo spread across global media, I watched the news from inside the facility. My face was blurred. High-ranking North Korean defector, CIA cooperation, 3 trillion won. The words scrolled across the lower third. An anchor relayed an analyst's commentary with a grave expression. I watched and felt strangely disconnected. That story was my story, but it felt like someone else's. Pyongyang would have been in an uproar. I knew that, and I couldn't shake one thought. My brothers, my cousins, the people I played with in the same neighborhood as a child, all still in Pyongyang. The moment this story broke, their lives changed. In North Korea, guilt by association Yunjwaje is as automatic as breathing. One person's act pulls an entire family into the consequences. I made this decision knowing that, and it still sits in my chest like a stone. The financial arrangements proceeded as agreed. 1 trillion won to the United States, 1 trillion to South Korea, lifetime protection and guaranteed asylum for myself and my family in exchange. Legal immunity was applied to the remainder. 3 trillion won settled. Money that was supposed to go to Iran. Money that would have become nuclear weapons, missiles. Money that might have one day detonated above some country's sky. If diverting it served any purpose, the feeling that lives on the other side of regret is larger than regret itself. I arrived in South Korea in the late summer of 2025. The decision to come here was mine. I requested it. America is safe, orderly and quiet. But I wanted to speak Korean. I wanted to live somewhere with a smell. I recognized to open the window in the morning and hear Korean voices. My wife felt the same. So did my son. We are the same people in the end. No matter how long the division has lasted, that route doesn't go anywhere. The South Korean government kept its word on protection. I can't tell you where I live. Guards are stationed around my home at all hours, rotating through day and night. No one recognizes me. My face and name have never been made public, but I can't shake the feeling of being watched. At first it brought back Pyongyang the life of always being under surveillance. Then one day it settled into something different. These eyes aren't tracking me to destroy me. They're watching to protect me. That difference living it turns out to be everything. I remember the first time I walked into a convenience store alone in Seoul. Past midnight. Bright fluorescent light. Shelves full snacks, drinks, ready meals, medicine, umbrellas, chargers. People walking in, picking things up, paying, walking out. I stood in front of those shelves for a long time. I didn't buy anything. I just stood there. In Pyongyang, this scene would be unimaginable. No ration cards. No anxious glances. Just money and anything you want. That obvious, unremarkable freedom I had lived for over 38 years in a place where it didn't exist. Standing under those convenience store lights, it hit me all at once. Something burned behind my eyes. I reached for the nearest drink, paid, and walked out. It was sweet. The press conference was held 2 months after I arrived in South Korea. Walking into that room, cameras flashed all at once. I sat down, and the moment I reached for the microphone, my hands trembled. They hadn't trembled that night in Tehran when I transferred 3 trillion won. Not in the CIA debriefing room. Not when I shook Trump's hand. Why then? I think I understood it later. Until that moment, only I knew the story. A handful of intelligence officials and insiders. But the moment I picked up that microphone, the story became the world's. It would reach someday the ears of the people still in Pyongyang. That weight came through my fingertips. I began slowly. The missile technology transfers between North Korea and Iran are continuing. At this very moment, my leaving did not stop them. A replacement has already been sent. Iran needs North Korea's missile technology. North Korea needs Iran's oil and financing. No matter how strong international sanctions become, that exchange keeps flowing underground. You can redirect water, but you can't stop water from moving. The world needs to know the reality of that. That is why I am sitting here. Hands went up across the room. I answered one by one. A reporter asked, "Do you have any regret about taking the 3 trillion won?" I paused. Then I said, "I'll be honest about what regret means to me. Whether what I did was right, I still can't say I'm completely certain. But I know one thing. If that money had gone where it was supposed to go, it would have become nuclear warheads, missiles, something that might have exploded above someone's country someday. If diverting it served even a small purpose, what I feel is larger than regret." Another hand went up. "Aren't you worried about the family members you left behind in Pyongyang?" I stopped at that question. Not for a moment, for a long time. The room went quiet. I sat in front of the microphone and stayed still. I'll be honest. That is what I think about every night before I fall asleep. My brothers are in Pyongyang. My cousins. People I ran through the same neighborhood with as a child. I don't know what happened to them after I did this. There's no way to know. Something bad, most likely. In this system, collective punishment is as natural as breathing. That was the thing I hesitated over the longest, the most deeply before I made this decision. To say I have no regrets about that part, I can't say that. The press conference ended. Walking out, autumn sunlight poured down. Before getting into the car, I looked up at the sky for a moment. Seoul's sky was high and clear, completely blue, not a cloud anywhere. That sky stretches north and becomes the sky over Pyongyang. The same sky. People who speak the same language, eat the same food, sing the same songs, live beneath it. Some of you may remember the time before the division when the war ended, and the country split in two and families were separated between North and South. That grief that decades haven't erased. I know now in my body what that longing feels like. When will the day come when we can move freely under that sky? I want to see it. I want to be alive to see it. The system I betrayed collapsed. The people of that land standing under the warm light of a convenience store, not needing to buy a single thing, just feeling the warmth of it. If I can see that day, the sound of the guard's footsteps circling my home, the stone pressing on my chest every night, maybe they'll be a little lighter. The guard opened the car door. I got in. Seoul's streets flowed past the window. I am alive.